first is Adam Corsini from the Jewish Museum, and he's worked in heritage for 20 years, first as an archaeologist before moving on to collections management with an emphasis on public engagement. Previous roles include those at the Museum of London's Archaeological Archive and the University of London's Layers of London project. He's going to be talking to us today about the Museum Beyond Walls, because they closed. So, Adam, if you can come and join us here. Thank you.
Okay. Everybody hear me okay? Yeah, sounds good. Yeah, so thanks, Amy, for the spoiler alert. We are closed. And using the power of PowerPoint design, you can see how it's effectively painting away the former Jewish Museum here. So if you never went to the Jewish Museum in Camden, gutted, you can't because it's closed. But the reason I'm here today is to talk about why we closed, some of the things we did in that process of closing, and as a consequence, how we're now still operating. Because one of the big messages we've tried to get across over the past year and a half is that although we're closed, we're not actually not functioning. We're still a functioning museum. And I could have called this presentation Jewish Museum London, Museum on the Move, which was sort of how we first started talking about it, and then Museum Without Walls, but we didn't really like the Without Walls because the more we've been doing, we actually realized that we've actually gone beyond walls now, and we are still operating as a fully functioning museum, really. So, if you never went to the Jewish Museum in London, this is what you missed. You missed a Georgian house on Albert Street in Camden. You missed our Welcome Gallery, which was a temporary space for small-scale exhibitions. We had 3 permanent galleries, one which was focused on the religious aspects of Judaism, so Judaism, a living faith. The History Gallery, which looked at the history of Jews in Britain from the Norman conquest right up to 1950s, let's say. And our Holocaust Gallery, which focused on the life of survivor Leon Greenman, who was one of the few British citizens, Jewish citizens, that went through the different camps for various reasons. The final space in the bottom right-hand corner here is what used to be our temporary gallery, where some of the more known exhibitions, like Jews, Money, Myth, the Amy Winehouse exhibition took place there. But since COVID, and when we reopened in July 2021, we turned this into a research centre. And as you can see, it stored our library, and it had spaces which allowed our teams of volunteers to work actively on the collection, engaging in research, but also digitization. And the reason I'm showing this is because all these pictures here have led to what we now do as a museum beyond walls, where we're still trying to do many of these aspects that the museum tried to do, but, as the name suggests, without a physical building. So, I thought I'd just address this, because I'm sure people are interested in why we closed, or why we closed the building. In 2022, we celebrated our 90th anniversary since opening in 1932. And the trustees decided that we wanted to have a vision for the future and do a piece of strategic work to see where we could go and where we should be going. And that really led to a paper which looked at the museum of the future, a vision for the future. So we had this sort of vision up here, and we wanted to do bigger and better things. That current building in Camden wasn't really fit for purpose anymore. The building, as many small institutions undergo, it needed renovating. We were running out of space. We didn't really have a temporary exhibition space because we turned that into the research centre. We were actually at full capacity for our learning sessions. We were having to turn away schools because we couldn't cater for as many schools. So we had this big vision up there. But we also had the big problem that we've all faced, post-COVID-19 resources. We didn't have many staff. We didn't have much funding. We just didn't have the capability to do both what we wanted to do with this vision, but also maintain a building in Camden at the same time. And I'm not going to stand up here and say, not lie, I'm going to tell the truth, basically. We were running out of money. It was cost of living, the bills went up, and we couldn't sustain that Camden building. So the decision was made to close the Camden site and see if we could operate and function as a museum on the move, a museum in the community, a museum that functions online, but isn't held back by the costs and the restrictions that we were having to face if we had stayed in the Camden site. Ultimately, we needed a new operating model, or there would have been no museum, and I wouldn't be standing here because I would have had this job. So, next slide. How to move out of building in 5 months. The short, unprofessional answer is don't. The answer what I'm going to tell you is actually don't panic, which is what we all had to do. The reality of it was that we didn't really have a choice. It's a bit like if you're moving house, you kind of have to figure out how to do it. If you're moving a museum, you have to figure out how to do it, just to scale it up a little bit. So we closed our doors on the 31st of July in 2023, and I put target, but really, our essential thing we had to do was move everything from the building by the 31st December, so we didn't have long at all. And when I say everything, it was everything. The collections, it was the furniture, it was every bit of AV, the coffee machine. We had a community learning kitchen, so we had to think about how we could recycle and repurpose the ovens, everything. But I'm only going to focus on collections because I'm collections manager. And my number one priority was prep. I wanted to make absolutely certain that we would know where everything in the collection was going, which box it would be in. I wanted to be confident that I could always retrieve an item as and when I had to. So we were very lucky that prior to the closure, we had a funded project which was auditing our collection. And we had, as part of that, we had several student placements from various universities come and help us with that audit program. So when we were told we were having to close the building, we went, great, okay, we're stopping the audit, and we're doing a slightly different audit now. We're doing location checks. So we got them into our stores, and we went through shelf by shelf and checked that everything on our CMS system, Axiell Collections, that said something should be on that shelf or in that box was actually in that box. And if it wasn't, we highlighted it as something we needed to find or track. But ultimately, we wanted to make sure we knew where everything was in place. As a consequence, our CMS location updates are the best they've ever been. There are so much fewer objects that say that word or those series of words not in place. We don't have as many as we did now. And I've looked back on this past year and a half with a lot of silver linings, and that was one of the silver linings. I'm generalizing here, but as museums, we often have things or in our collection that aren't in the right place. You know, they might have gone back on the shelf next to the shelf they should have gone in, or the box that is up here, actually, they put something in this box over here. By doing these quick location checks, it forced us to find those missing objects, and we found a huge amount in that we were a good museum, but we found enough to keep us going. One of the huge bits of work we had to do was inform our lenders. We had a lot of items that have been lent into the collection over the years, and obviously they're a key stakeholder. So that took a fair amount of work, and it was probably around 60% we retained and 40% that went back to lenders. They said, okay, we don't know what you're doing. Like, you haven't got, if you're not putting our objects on display anymore, we'd prefer to have them back and see if we can present them somewhere else. So as well as packing up the collection, there was a lot of logistics and collections management logistics that needed to take place. And once we closed in July 2023, we then began our phase packing schedule. So we removed all the small items from the gallery and returned them to the store. The reason I chose to do this was to try and keep similar objects all together. What I didn't want to be was in a situation where we had all our, let's say, Torah scrolls, apart from the ones that were on display, and then suddenly that wasn't with the rest of the collection. We wanted to make sure that we could track all those together and keep as much as thematically in the same spaces. We transfer all our shelf contents to boxes whenever possible, and that's internally with the staff that we had, the collection staff. We had 3 members of staff to do this, so it wasn't a lot. I was a lot less grey when I started. But there were, as you can see from our images of the stores here, there were several items which, as collections managers, we didn't have the expertise to do, and we needed external help. As well as the paintings and larger items, we had some really important and really difficult items to move. I mean, when they announced we were closing the museum, my initial thought was, how am I going to get rid of a mikveh? A big ritual bath from the 13th century. So we recruited fine art specialists, conservators. You can see Taylor Pierce at the bottom here. and we factored that into the whole removal process. And these are all boxed and crated up, and again, updated with CMS. This large stained glass window here was actually part of the Jewish Military Museum collection, which, as an organization, AJEX, they decided that they wanted to take that museum in a different direction. So that was a huge part of what we had, which was on loan, and has gone back to AJEX. And logistics, including the conservation work, was a significant challenge to fit that into the packing up and the removal of items. So here we go, all boxed up. We've got the crates with the mikveh here. We had Queen's Fine Art, who are our external specialists to come in and help us pack things up. So lots of boxes and crates, as you can see in left here. And then we use really useful boxes with security tape to box up the general items in the collection. I've just realized my feet are in that photograph. Yeah, box up the items. And each box has its own number, as you can expect, and then we track that location-wise. So now, I'll just go back, actually. So now all our objects are in the fine art storage. We have access to the collection, but the process of accessing that collection means we, again, have to think very logistically. So we have to plan any engagement work we're doing a good few months in advance to know what we then have to go to retrieve from the stores. There are retrieval costs, and we have to factor that into the forward program. And truth be told, I think we're all members on the team, when we go to our store, we have that little bit of anxiety. Did that CMS work? Did those location checks work? Are we actually going to find the things we're looking for? And I'm pleased to say, over the year and a half, we've actually have 100% success rates. So, we did it well. I'm fine. Thank you. Who clapped? Thank you. So, if closing the museum wasn't hard enough, we also wanted to operate as I mentioned earlier, a museum without walls and display the collection, host venues. So whilst one hand was packing up the collection and putting everything away, the other one was planning events, planning displays, and trying to expand our work. And I mentioned earlier about silver linings. And what we found were that being a museum whose name includes the word London means that everybody came to London to see the collection. And there aren't just Jewish people in London, and there aren't just people in London, We want to try and reach out as much as we can. So we use this opportunity to try and spread ourselves across the country. And the way I looked at it was very sort of top level, but look at potential venues in these 4 categories. We wanted to have a look at aligned venues. And what I mean by that are venues which have the same kind of values, the same kind of mission, and would be ideal places where we could transfer what we did have in our Camden site and present that story in this new space. So an example here is the Holocaust gallery that we had, and we contacted the National Holocaust Centre Museum, who had a very small display about Leon Greenman, and they jumped at the chance to be able to have some of our objects on loan and present that story in a new way. We were a Camden-based museum, and we had connections with Camden Council, including funding. So we also wanted to make sure we still had a local presence and served that community in one way or another. And we looked at venues in Camden, and Swiss Cottage Library, some of you may know, is Camden's largest library, and that served as a good space to explore and see if we could create a partnership with the Swiss Cottage Library and help out there. And then the best way to get offers to help is to say you're closing the museum, because people go, oh, it's so sad, how can we help? We go, great, take some objects. So offers to help, as we'll see in a moment, JW3, which is the community centre on Finchley Road, and then several synagogues. But we also are an NPO-funded museum, which had its own challenges as part of this process. But we wanted to look at priority areas. Enfield and the borough of Enfield was one of those, and indeed Bradford. And we'll come on to Bradford. So here's how it used to look on the left, and here's how it's now looking in the National Holocaust Centre. So clearly it's a much scaled back display, and it's only one display case, but we still are able to tell the life story of Leon Greenman in the National Holocaust Centre here. The Swiss Cottage Library, we had an exhibition which lasted a month there last March, and we were able to have a pretty much the whole history of, a scaled-back version of our museum, from our history gallery with one display case, which included a mikveh stone, which wasn't part of the reconstruction, I hasten to add, right up to a inclusive Haggadah, which is read during the Passover service. And we had photographs from our inclusive Judaism library, which are images that are donated by the community on the walls as well. So, in fact, more so than the museum prior, when it was existing, we actually had history going right up to present day in 2023 at the time. These stalls on the left-hand side used to be in our welcome space, so we transferred that to the community centre, JW3, and they're very much co-curated, so we're still able to use that as a co-curation space. West London Synagogue, again, had these inclusive Judaism images, plus some previous images from the collection, so it allowed us to sort of explore what we did have and how we can present those stories in a new, accessible way. These priority areas, oh gosh, time really is up. Oh yeah. So here's Bradford and Enfield Museum, again, local stories that we're able to present to audiences that have never seen our collection before. And then we say thank you to COVID, because we did loads of work online during COVID, online workshops, museum mornings over here, and we're ever more so exploring how we can create videos and present ourselves online in a better way. Here's some contemporary collecting projects. So I can talk about this maybe later if you want to chat about it, but we're basically creating a community photo album and improving our inclusive stories. I can talk about this more later, or maybe in questions. October 7th obviously had a huge impact on the Jewish community. We wanted to document that in some form, active collecting projects. And then very final thing is our presence online. Another silver lining of closing meant that we were able to operate as this museum on walls with funding from the National Lottery, and they gave us money to develop our digital content, including the new collections online in the bottom left, and 3D scan our items like this one here, and now we have we're starting to build a collection on Sketchfab. So sorry, that was like a very quick 10 minutes, but hopefully that showed you how, even if you are faced with something which makes you go, you can still operate and build a community and engagement in the community. So I'll stop there.